This is Brass Check, and it's an update on our current research direction. We spent a lot of time in the 1990s talking about election fraud and the fact that the U.S. appeared to be going into a permanent war status. That was, over 20 years ago, and we're deep in it. In the early 2000s, we talked about what appeared to be out-of-control fraud going on Wall Street, and we were about 5 years too early, but it did finally blow up in 2008. Our focus now is on a perennial problem, which is blatant, over-the-top corruption in the medical industry. And we've done a lot of stuff on that, and we'll be doing a lot more. We try to be practical, offer practical advice. For example, we put out a video not long ago that pointed out that if you have a gas stove at home, you should probably, if you can, open windows when you're using that stove. If you've got a vent fan, turn the vent fan on the whole time you're using that stove, and leave it on even when you turn the stove off for a while to really clear the air. Testers in Germany found out that just simply turning on a gas stove increases the indoor air pollution by a factor of 10 versus what it would be like standing out on a busy street corner. Nobody tells you this. Yeah, and they don't tell you this for the same reason they don't tell you anything. They don't want you to know because you'd be outraged. So a lot of our videos have been practical matters like that. We've pointed out that many personal care products, shampoos, soaps, things that are used to clean clothes, contain toxins, carcinogens, neurotoxins, all little things that you can do to improve your health, and things that you will absolutely never hear on TV. Why? Because, and I think everybody knows this, everything on TV, everything in the newspapers is in the service of manufacturers and people that have something to sell. There is no news, there's no information, there's no public service, nothing. It's all about taking care of the people who have the most amount of money. And which brings us to healthcare, so-called healthcare. The deeper you get into this subject, the more it just becomes clear this is one of the most sinister rackets of all time. And just a little bit of evidence. You've probably had this experience. If not, I'm sure you can reach out and touch somebody not far from you that's had it. You go to a doctor, and they tell you three things. We don't know what causes it. It can't be cured, but we can help you with the symptoms. And there's three frauds there. One, we don't know what causes it. Well, that's very convenient since about 80% of all illnesses come from environmental causes. Could be air pollution, could be water pollution, it could be, as I mentioned earlier, toxins in products, it could be toxins in foods. We're doing a lot of research into glyphosate, which is now in everything, and it appears to be doing some really serious biochemical harm to the human being. And we're doing really cutting-edge work there. We'll be posting that soon. Also with solutions, what you can do to address it. So, yeah, we don't know what causes it. For instance, vaccines. We have a epidemic of autism that perfectly matches the increase in mandatory vaccines, and we don't know what causes autism. It's a mystery. So not knowing the cause is a great way to protect the manufacturing interests who are responsible for these epidemics, and it's also a great way to not put in preventative measures, because the medical services industry really is not interested in preventative measures because that cuts into its revenue. They have zero, based on their values and their orientation and how they operate and how it's set up, they have zero incentive to promote public health. In my little village where I live, there's no public health courses made available in the public setting. We've had one in the last 20 years I've been here, which is how to give somebody, it's a kind of an injection if they're having a heroin or opiate withdrawal or overdose. That's the only public health education I've ever seen offered to the public by our tax-paying supported government here. Pretty pathetic. So that we don't know what causes it. You're going to hear that over and over again, and in many cases, it's just a straight-up lie. You probably heard these anecdotal stories of somebody with a very serious disease, and they've been given up for lost, and they decide to clean out their house. You know, it's sort of an instinctual thing people do, and they go into remission. And amazingly, people will go, oh, well, that has to do with spiritual things. No, it may just have to do with, a huge percentage of the products, cleaning products, laundry products, personal care products that people have are literally toxic. And people can improve their health just by getting rid of them and changing to, non-poisoned versions. But you'll never hear that on TV. They also will tell you that there is no cure. Well, I know of many, many diseases where there's a cure that the public's not aware of. I think one of the most dramatic examples is there's a kind of epileptic seizure disease that children get, and it's quite severe. They might have, 10, 15, 20 seizures a day, even more. And if you go to a doctor, they'll say, we don't know what causes it, which could be true in that case, and there is no cure. And the no cure part is an absolute lie. In the 1920s, the Mayo Clinic, which is not some obscure fringe organization, found a cure for this, and it's dietary. And I know a mother, and she knows thousands of mothers who, when they went to their doctor to try to get help for this disease, were given nothing but drugs, and the drugs made things worse. Didn't help, and often made things much, much worse, and precious time was lost in treating the children. And then this woman found out that the Mayo Clinic had this diet, and she tried it. That week, the seizures went away. He went from 20 per day to 1 a week, 1 every 2 weeks. That fast. It was that fast. That's not always that fast in every case. But the diet is promising. And she went back to her doctor and said, why didn't you tell me this? And this is the answer. We know all about that diet, but we find it's too hard for parents to comply with, so we don't even bother to tell them. That really happened. And it's not an unusual, rare occurrence. So we don't know what caused it. There is no cure. And then the third one is, but we can relieve your symptoms, or we can help you manage your symptoms, preferably for life, at a very high cost. And not long ago, we featured a document that came out of Goldman Sachs. It was written by a guy that's an analyst for the pharmaceutical industry. And he's not a whistleblower, and he didn't think he was saying anything controversial. He just pointed out to his clients and colleagues that, you know what, I don't think there's any money in cures. And if your orientation is it's all about the money, I guess you're right. Let people be sick forever and charge them as much as you can before they die. That's the model. That's the medical services model in the United States. So my recommendation to everybody is, if you've got a disease, you must become an expert in that disease. And your guess is as good as anybody. You can probably become as expert as your doctor in a very short period of time, because none of them seem to know anything except how to dispense drugs. And you are allowed to be curious, and you are allowed to ask questions, and you are allowed to research, and you are allowed to do your own thinking, contrary to what your doctor will probably try to intimidate you into believing. And when they tell you, oh, don't go on the internet, that is a form of con artistry. Imagine if you needed a roof on your house, and you went to the internet and you found some guy, and he gave a price. Isn't it intelligent to find out as much as you can about other roof contractors, other methods, other options. But somehow with medicine, no, can't do that. Whoever your doctor is, you got to listen to him. Whatever he says, he may know nothing. He may be in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. He may be getting a free trip to Hawaii because you're the next person that he needs to put on that drug to meet his quota. Or maybe he'll get paid to deliver a speech somewhere. It's a payoff. A lot of them are involved in it. So that's why we're focusing on medicine now. I don't know what else, what can you do about some of these other things at this point? But you can take care of your own health. We're now about to see a excerpt from a conference that was held at the European Parliament, and this is a medical doctor talking about fraud in medical research. And I hope you watch it. It's very short, and it gets right to the point about how out of control and unreliable and corrupt the medical services industry is in the world at large, but particularly in the United States and Europe. And Europe's supposed to be a better, more progressive place. Well, you'll see from this video that there's quite a bit of problems there as well. So, none of us are going to live forever, and if you've got a body, you've automatically got a problem. It's just something that we all have to deal with. Our ancestors dealt with it, and we have to deal with it too. And the main thing is not to fall prey to the corruption and the intimidation and the bullying tactics used by people in the medical profession to protect their incomes and their revenue.
He says some publications are simply organized criminal activities, which may be at the behest of the sponsors, when prominent academics are paid large sums of money to publish false data by industry, or a sponsor may be one of the victims when payments for conducting research are made to the investigators who simply fabricate data. Medical journals have a financial pressure to publish positive findings of research on drugs and medical devices because their manufacturers buy reprints for the papers of distribution of doctors who then pay for advertisements as well, linked to articles that are favourable to their product. So to protect their reputations, academic institutions conceal research misconduct, destroy evidence, and silence whistleblowers. By the way, if you look at the document which is available online, you can find examples of all of this. I'm not going to go through it because I think that would be unfair, but you can find this. Journals are reluctant to admit that they have published flawed research, so they commonly refuse to publish failures to replicate. Fear of libel action contributes to the failure to expose research misconduct. Because lenient sanctions are imposed, institutions believe that the misconduct is not very serious and therefore fraudsters are not deterred. And he says the best way forward really is for criminal action for certain forms of research misconduct, and I agree with him. Now, one example here, one Dutch researcher in 2011 was found guilty for publishing fictitious data on the use of beta blocker drugs for non-cardiac surgery. And he was expelled from his institution. But what was very extraordinary is that his research, many papers were published in very high-impact journals. He influenced the European Society of Cardiology guidelines. And this research, it's estimated that it resulted, the use of beta blockers where it wasn't indicated ultimately, when it was found that this data was dodgy. It's estimated that over Europe, over 8 years, across Europe, this was responsible for 800,000 excess deaths. 800,000 excess deaths.